Okay, everyone, good evening. Can you all hear me? If somebody could just let me know by putting something in the chat box. Oh, perfect. Thanks, guys. All right, well, welcome to the sheep or the lamb carcass and live evaluation, as well as meat cookery here in the new meat science building. So tonight, I just want to make you aware of a few things in terms of how the meeting will go. So firstly, we want you to put the questions that you have in the Q&A portion on the bottom. We would love for you to do that, and we will try to do them live, or we will write you an answer. Secondly, if you want to receive some educational credits tonight, I know some of your county fairs may. I put it in the chat, but here is the link for the form. We will be sending out an email following this evening's session to this link. So hang on, we'll send it to you in a follow-up email if you miss it this evening. And this is a great way for you to tell us what you learned about tonight from tonight's program and be able to kind of think about how you want to incorporate it into your project for this year. Just a few things if you want to keep up to date with what's going on and when there will be more sessions such as tonight, the follow-up email will have all of these links in which you can connect in terms of social media or the website or even YouTube, where all of the recordings of the virtual education sessions are held. So check out the YouTube channel. And lastly, this evening, make sure you fill out the evaluation form. It will be in the follow-up email, and we love feedback from you all. This helps us prepare additional programs for you that you might be interested in. So please, please, please fill that out. We would love to hear from you. Okay, so we're going to get right into tonight's program. I just want to make you aware, if you didn't have a chance to watch the 9-minute video that talked about the live evaluation, as well as the carcass evaluation of the 3 lambs that we saw. If you didn't, here is a slide that really just gives a quick onesie of what we did. So the first lamb, if you remember, was number 1, and that was the Targhee ewe lamb. And that ewe lamb weighed 115 pounds live, had a 71-pound carcass weight, and had a fat thickness of 0.2. So you can see this lamb was really the ewe that we picked that was going to be somewhat lighter muscled and trim. And that kind of held true, as the ribeye area size was only 2.15. The body wall was 0.8, and the leg score, which you can see, and in the rear view, there wasn't a lot of muscle shape, not a lot of muscle dimension, and kind of narrow chested and narrow base. So knowing what we know in a really quick way about live animal evaluation, you can see that this lamb definitely kind of, fell apart in terms of muscle. Quality grade was Choice Plus and BCTRC, which we'll talk briefly about. It's really kind of the same formula as what we see in percent lean in pigs. It's basically the amount of, basically closely trimmed retail cuts that you get from the carcass. So no bones included, boneless, trim as much fat off as you can. And that's kind of the total amount as a percentage. And usually lambs that are super good or better at this usually are like 46, 47, maybe even 48. So that's number 1. Let's move to number 2. Number 2 was the Polypay ewe. And so Polypays as a breed are just a little bit more moderate framed. They are a dual purpose breed, but more on the mothering side or the maternal side. So those types of breeds of sheep tend to get a little fatter in a quicker amount of time than other breeds. And so you can see this Polypay ewe, the widest part of her is the middle. And so her football shaped physique, I guess, is showing us that she's going to have probably a pretty fat body wall or be fatter, okay, in general over the ribeye. And you can see that in that picture in the lower right. So the live weight on this lamb was 122 pounds, carcass weight was 68 and a half, and fat thickness was 0.3. Body wall was 1.2, so that's where that football shape kind of came in, is where it came through with a really big body wall, 1.2 inches, and the ribeye size was 2.1, so kind of small. Leg score was kind of light, and the quality grade was prime, which isn't unheard of to see in sheep, but because of the fat, generally, that kind of has a lot to do with quality grade. And as a reminder, quality grade does not mean as much in sheep as it does in beef. So just to note. And BCTRC for this lamb was 43, so pretty low, okay? And lamb number 3, let's round out with that one. That's that Hampshire ewe lamb that really had a lot of expression of muscle, was really wide based. You could see a lot of width through that front end and through the rear, and really had kind of that hourglass look. A lot of indentation at the shoulder and at their loin hip junction. So we should see that one to be kind of trim and heavy muscle. And that really kind of came out to actually occur. 117 pounds, 68 and a half carcass weight. Fat thickness was only 0.18, so nice. And body wall was 0.9. Ribeye area was 3.1. And, oh, I see I have a little, leg score is actually 14, not 41. That'd be a really big leg score, right? So quality grade was a choice minus. So all acceptable in terms of quality grade. And you can see the BCTRC here is much higher than number 1 and 2 because this lamb was the trimmest and had the most muscle. And any of these kind of percent muscle formulas really tend to enjoy the animals that are the trimmest. So they give them the biggest advantage, okay? So I just wanted to give you a brief look at those and remind you of those that video out there. Make sure you review it. It's going to be there for eternity or as long as it's the YouTube channel is available. And we're going to pass this over now to the crew here. So we have been spending today ribbing up and cutting up and fabricating these whole carcasses for you into cuts. And we've got Cody here. Cody Hiemke from Niman Ranch is here to kind of go through what those are and how they put together specialty cuts to talk about. Dr. Jeff Sindelar, meat science, extension meat science specialist, is also going to talk about some of those kinds of things as well as cookery in each of those areas. Okay, so give us a hot second here. We're going to pass this over. I'm going to stop sharing. And we'll get the video feedback. Okay, so everybody see Cody? Put that in the chat if you want. Everybody see and hear us.
All right. Hello, everybody. So let's show the rest of the crew. Justin and Dr. Sindelar.
Thanks for coming and helping, and Dr. Jeff Sindelar.
So our goal here with this section, we're 5 minutes ahead of schedule. So, but our goal here for the next, what do we have? Yeah, next 15 minutes, maybe a little bit more, is to kind of talk through the different cuts of the carcass, the different parts of the carcass, how we further cut them into other cuts, some that may have more retail applications, some that may have more food service application. Before I start, I will kind of share what I kind of feel is one of the really good resources. There we go. I think now we're showing up. One of the really good resources to talk about cuts, you know, how carcasses are broke down. The meat buyer's guide. There will be a new version coming out soon. It will go through This is a page of all kinds of different rack cuts, but it shows you some of the technical ways on how these are cut, different naming mechanisms for them. So if you're doing direct marketing, this is a really good book to understand what different cuts are. Or if you're a processor and need some references, I highly recommend it. Back on screen. So with that, I think we'll start here with this half carcass. This is 1/2 the Hampshire lamb that we fabricated. We basically broke it down into major primals. We'll start. So this is the forequarter here, the front half here, and the back half is off to the left. And from head to tail, we will start with, this is the bone-in shoulder. We remove the neck, and so we're left with a square cut shoulder, and we didn't do much trimming on these. I wanted to kind of show, what different fat levels look like throughout the carcass. When lambs fatten, I should have cleaned up some of the bone dust there, but when lambs and all animals fatten, they generally fatten from head to tail. So you're going to see a lot more fat in the shoulder than you are per se in the leg. So this neck, we only have one example of the neck here. We first kind of squared it off. This is basically, I would go into the bone. But then the neck is a cut that really, when you cook it, you need to be braising it. You need moist heat to cook it and cook it slowly. That's going to break down all the connective tissue that's in here. Super flavorful, long cook, a really good hearty type meal. Similar with the shoulder, you can treat this as if it was a pork butt and smoke it and pull it. You can, and we'll show some different cuts later, but we can break this down into a boneless shoulder. We can take some shoulder chops, some blade chops, and some arm chops off of here. Moving down to the split rack. This is definitely something that we see a lot more of with a lot of demand for food service. And we, again, very rough cut for this primal here. This is called the chine bone. We left the chine bone on. There's a blade bone in here that we left that on. This could be further processed in a lot of different ways. We did a couple of really simple ones to show you later. Down here is the breast. We made it a little bit shorter. We put a little bit more. Typically, the breast would have another 2 inches or so from the back. But this is going to be similar to your pork spare rib. We can further break this down into a couple different cuts. Also something that, generally slower cooking, smoking, then hitting them with some high heat at the end. Foreshank, it's that front shank, very similar to the neck, as well as the hind shank that we'll get into later, something you would want to braise. And I left this out here just because it has some relevance right now. Once a year, this particular cut, it's the 4-trotter, actually has some demand for it. And that's for the Jewish faith when they have Passover. This is part of their Seder plate. And I am failing at remembering what it represents, but it does represent something. So, this week for work, we're sending out 12 cases of those to some different retailers, basically for that Passover meal. All right. Any questions at all that we see? Keep going. Any comments from you guys? Okay.
Maybe for Jack, has the university ever made bacon from lamb? Is there that type of lamb?
Why don't you start out by opportunities for that? I'll get to the meat science question.
Yeah, we have had some processors that do make. There's a processor in Indiana that makes some bacon. There's not a tremendous amount of demand for it, but when you do make that, and Bernie, I'll show these too. So if we were to make a lamb belly, it would be the lower part of this breast and the lower part of this loin. So this would all come off into a belly. And you can see, compared to a pork rib, there's not a tremendous amount of thickness there to make belly. To make bacon from. So.
Yep, and so we currently do not make lamb bacon. We make some other lamb products like lamb bratwurst and a few other sausages. But we definitely may consider it in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it is a nice cut to consider because generally the breast is something that can be a little bit harder to move. And it adds a lot of value to this lower end of the loin as well that would generally just go in the trim. So I think I'll move on to the loin real quick. So we left this as I would call this a split drop loin. These were ribbed, I think on Monday. So there's some discoloration there just because they've been hanging since Monday. This is going to be from the rack end. So obviously those are bookend pieces there. And this is going to be, didn't figure that out either. This is going to be from the leg end. So as the loin moves through the carcass, you also have underneath this fat layer here, you have the tenderloin. So we've got the longissimus muscle, in beef, that would be a strip loin, and then the tenderloin down below. Generally, we don't sell a lot of boneless loins, particularly in the United States. Imported lamb does, but that gets to be a pretty expensive cut once you take all the bones out. So, and then here we have a whole bone-in trotter off leg. We left the shank on. We'll show you what the leg looks like a little later with the shank off. But again, you can see that other end. We probably could have broken this back about an inch, just to leave a little bit. This would have been a better cut to leave on the loin. There's more value per pound in the loin than there is on the I think with that, we could probably move to the shoulder tray. Marty?
Yep.
All right. So we did a couple things here. We didn't bone out a shoulder. Frankly, that's a little bit of a longer processing, more difficult processing to do. But what we did is we made 3 blade bone chops. So these are going to come. So we basically took and made 3 cuts in here to get each of these. And this is that blade bone. Blade bone is going to feed into the rack. Get that. Slide a little bit. So we got these 3 cuts. And then down here, we made, and I just did a little quick trimming on this. This would be considered an arm bone. So this is, or excuse me, an arm chop. That comes from the lower end of this shoulder. So blade bones from here, arm bones from down here. That does leave us with kind of a hump that we could have maybe taken one more of these blade chops out of here, but this will basically get boned out for stew, maybe for grind. As you start looking at the individual muscles in here, if you're familiar with beef, you have the top blade steak, which is a really tender cut in beef. You would seam out, there's this little seam in here, you would seam that out to turn it into a flat iron. If you really want to get into it, and all of these individual muscles are really actually kind of fun to cook and eat separately. So you could come in and, just come through the seams and take it all out and turn one of those big shoulders into 5 or 6 dishes if you were interested. One other thing we did right towards the end of processing today, and I forgot to ask that we take this chine bone off, but we just took these 2 ribs from the shoulder and turned it into what is a super tasty, these are very similar to the rack, really tender cuts right here. We took the blade bone off and turned this into something that, put this on the smoker, put it on the grill, it'd be really tasty. And this is a cut that you could value add quite a bit, sell at a higher price per pound compared to the rest of these cuts.
Okay, do you got time for questions, guys?
Sure.
Jeff, do you want to answer this one? Where does the ground come from the senior ground? So could we talk about probably from these cuts up here, where would that come from?
Sure. So the ground lamb would come from all the miscellaneous trimmings from removing the higher dollar, more desirable cuts. So it could come from, taking the rack and maybe boning out this portion, or maybe some parts of the plate, right? Where there's some small pieces. If there's not much of a desire to do things with the breast, the shank, or even the neck slices. So it's all those small parts and pieces. And of course, you can take an entire lamb and grind it all into ground lamb, which may make for a very expensive ground lamb product, but you certainly could do that.
I did that with some of my lambs this year. My ground lamb was much more expensive.
I'm sure.
On the personal ones that I raised. Like on the Niman program, we'll process about 250 lambs a week. And we get about 180 pounds of 80 trim from them. So less than a pound per head of 80 trim. We'll get a couple pounds of 65% lean trim. So when I'm doing grind for that program, I'm doing about 30% trim, 30% boneless legs, and 30% shoulders. Just to, I mean, one, it helps me move those end meats. It also gives me the volume I need for the ground lamb that we're selling too.
Don't also forget, a lot of ground lamb goes into Euro meat, right? Cannot probably produce enough of those raw materials for that product, certainly in summertime and fall time parts of the year.
Questions on the Jewish Passover, the cut again, can you just reference that again?
It's the cut, that's the four trotter. So if you were to actually to look it up, if you were to Google Seder bone, Seder, you'd be able to learn a lot more about it. And I feel bad that I should know more and don't at the moment.
That's okay, yeah. So lamb is definitely a product that a lot of different ethnic cultures utilize. So lots of cool things that they use different parts for. And I think the other question, Jeff, if you're able, there was a question about the university, if they make lamb, if the university makes lamb sticks. So like snack sticks, but if they're made out of lamb.
So we don't right now. We eventually will. We're slowly starting to harvest lambs in the new meat science building, and so we've only actually had 2 lamb harvests. But as we start doing more of it, we'll definitely be expanding our market. This may be of no surprise to most on this call, this meeting, but lamb is a really popular cut, a really popular species to have on university campuses, especially at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So when we have lamb, it's gone very, very, very quickly.
Great, I think we're ready to continue.
All right, sounds good. So we're going to move on to the rack. So that's right back from the shoulder here. And this one, we left the chine bone on this. This is just basically a split rack. We kept it super simple. And all we did here is we removed this chine bone. So that's the vertebral column here. That this will allow, as long as you remove this, you don't need a saw to do anything more on a rack. You can come in and make your own chops with a knife. You can clean this up just by taking these processes off here and having a really beautiful, this is similar to what we did here, but again, this was the polypay. That's how much fat you end up getting in there on that polypay ewe lamb. But we took the chine bone off here, and we could have lifted this out of here for a little bit of a better presentation. A lot of times, so this particular rack, I process this a few different ways. This is for Niman, this is kind of our base rack, just a split chine off, very easy for chefs to further manipulate if they would like. We also sell a cap off rack. So we'll take everything above this blade bone, gets pulled off, and then we'll French it, and we weren't going to take the time to French today. But on that one, we'll take just expose about 1 inch of the bones here for a nice presentation. The third one we'll do, excuse me, I was talking about cap on earlier. The third one, but when we do that, we just pull this blade bone out. We leave this top muscle in here. The other one we'll do is take the complete cap off, and we'll French it down basically 3 inches down the bone. You generally got about 4 inches between the eye and the end of this bone. We'll take all of this off, so we've got nice long bones sticking out. When this cut is processed that far, we're looking at something that probably has $26 to $27 worth of cost in it per pound, just because of all the work we put into it and all the meat we took and fat we took away from it. Whereas this other one here is going to be at least half of that. But sometimes the restaurants, if they really look at it, because of the lower piece weight on this, this is a better portion cost when I break this down and take all that off of there. So,
Yeah, so you're also adding value and cost because you're removing some of the lower value portion of the product. So you have a higher percentage of high dollar, more expensive cuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got the example here of the rib chops, and then we did have just a squared breast. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this will usually be a little bit longer. This could be further processed by taking this outer layer off here, which is considered fell, and doing a little bit more trimming. There's some hard bone right here. We've got cartilage here, but then a hard bone here. And if we do that, we turn this into what's called a Denver rib, which would be equivalent to a St. Louis rib in the pork world. Where are we at there? Okay. We have to start speeding up. So we got into the loin. Drop loin. So this was the drop loin. There's not a lot of versatility in the loin. Generally, you're going to make chops out of it for the most part. I did take and bone one out. So, and for those of you that are butchers on here, Mr. Nick Forrest, please don't criticize me too much in my butchery. But we got 2 single boneless loins and then 2 tender loins. This particular cut here, you know, if we're selling, we were selling basically what this came off of with a little bit of tail for, say, $10. This now becomes about $20 a pound because we've removed this bone and we've taken the time to do all the processing. I want to give you
Have
a
a bunch of chops, right? Inch
Yep.
and a half, you said?
Yeah, we did about 1.5 inches on them, nice thick, tasty chops. And again, you know, we didn't do any further trimming on these to make these retail ready. They would definitely be trimmed down. So, but that was part of what we were trying to show today is we saw how those carcasses were hanging, how then does the back impact the cuts. All right, so we had our whole leg here. What we've done is we removed the shank, we removed the sirloin, and then we're left with this center cut bone and leg. So you basically, we would have pulled out a little bit more of this here, and all you would have is the femur bone in there. I didn't catch this, but we didn't get that fully fabricated there. But this is a pretty simple roast. You know, put it in the oven. Lamb is inherently tender. The leg muscles are basically as tender as beef middle meats. So rather than this big roast that, you know, it's going to cost you 40, 50, 60 bucks, I would prefer to take the time to break them out in individual muscles. So that's where, you know, the Taylor family has one senior left at home. And so Todd and Justin, you know, Todd wanted to figure out how do we break these legs down into smaller pieces. So those two broke these down. So we've got the bottom round here, which, just make sure I can show there. Nice flat piece, easy to grill, you know, good for just a few people. We've got the inside or top round. It's got different names, very lean cut. We have the sirloin tip, also very lean, but you do have some connective tissue in here that you kind of need to trim out. I cut a little bit of this up for a dish that we're going to do later, but this is the sirloin tip or the knuckle, both compatible names. And then what I think is the most underrated cut in the lamb, the sirloin. And this can be further cut down into more of a sirloin center, but super tender, super tasty, great on the grill, great in the smoker. And you know, if you're doing direct marketing, get $5 for your bone. It's free money almost. And we did one more thing with legs. they don't do this with the lamb dry fab, but they do have a retail application. And, so some of these would not go on a retail case. This would be trimmed out. This cut here would probably be cut either into kebab meat. Similar to this one here, you'll see that there's some glands that you get into that you would want to pull those out. We simply cut this end to end, kind of show you what it would look like. Similarly, these are some bone-in sirloin chops that, again, if these were going into a package to be sold, we'd be trimming these up a little bit more. I don't make a lot of bone-in sirloins, but then we are left with this down here that, again, trim it down into kebab meat. You're getting into the end of the shank here, which there's more connective tissue in there, so that'll be a little bit tougher.
The nice thing about a display like this is it shows everyone how much fat, how much lean, how much bone is in certain parts, or actually throughout the entire carcass. In this case, the hind saddle, the leg portion of that. So, and collectively, there's a significant amount of fat.
Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned earlier that they fatten from head to tail, but they also fatten a lot over the sirloin and that sirloin loin juncture. This kind of brings me back to what now, 25 years ago with Dr. Kaufman, when I'd have to come here and identify all these muscles every inch of a pig.
Yeah. So if you're raising lambs, you're thinking about finishing them, and you're not sure if they're a little bit too far or not quite far enough. This definitely gives you a visual of how maybe pushing them a little bit too far may cost you money in the long run.
Yep. I was just checking the time there. We were hoping to end this one at 7:35, so I think we look good on time at the moment.
Maybe one thing, Jeff, one question, because what do you do with all the fat and the lean? We'll just leave it. I know the question, people wanted me to repeat it by the microphone a little bit more.
Yeah.
So the question is, what do you do with all the fat on the carcass?
Yep. So if you don't have a good use for it, it gets thrown away and inedible. But if you can utilize that fat as part of trimmings, then you can do some value-add processing. Cody will show a couple products and explain that in the next session, but it's a good raw material for making sausage, right? Like we make a Bavaria-style lamb bratwurst, which is really, really popular, and it needs 15-20% fat to make it have a good texture and flavor. So that fat would be a great resource for a product like that.
And can you say too, maybe in general, like we teach 4-H and FFA kids based on the cut and where they're located, just in generalities, what's the cookery methods? So like if we see this leg here, Cody's going to go into some of those, but just talk about moist heat a little bit, just in high level.
Sure. So I'd like to use beef carcasses or beef cuts as a good grounding for how to cook other species. So if you think about beef animals, the muscles that are used for locomotion, so the front and the back, those are usually tougher. And then the ones in the middle meats are usually more tender. So the ones on the ends of the carcasses, since they're tougher, you usually want to use a bit more of a moist heat. The moisture and the heat will break down some of the connective tissue and have a tenderizing effect. Whereas the cuts in the middle, you can use more dry heat. And that dry heat gives more flavor development, can help with the texture, really makes a nice eating experience. For lamb, that concept is really the same. It's just not quite as severe, right? So you can really do a lot more dry cookery throughout the entire lamb carcass from head to tail, but there are certain exceptions to that. So if you think about like the shank, right? Or the neck slices or certain parts of the leg, you have to be a little bit more careful. Think about using a little bit more moist cookery, but in lots of other cuts, it's not quite so severe. So if you won't create a really bad eating experience, a really tough cut, if you happen to use too much dry cookery for most lamb cuts.
And that's one of the neat things about lamb is you get a few more of those braising cookery things, because in beef that neck's going to be boned out, the shank's usually going to be boned out, but they're just great flavorful cuts too.
Okay, that's great, guys. I think we're ready to go into the other room, into the kitchen. So I'm going to go on mute here, and Todd Taylor is going to guide through a few things that he wants to share about the lambs from the sheep unit, and then just in general our resources that we use when we do harvest animals here on campus. And if he's got time to answer a few questions in person. All right, we'll see you in a couple of minutes. All right, I think we're ready. Maybe you take that and I'll. Yep.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not 100% certain what I'm supposed to do other than talk about where the lambs came from. These lambs came from Arlington. I've answered a few questions box and worked through some of those a little bit. But you know, these lambs are fed on grain. We run the 3 different breeds up there: the Hiemke, the Targees, and the Polypace. So you've seen essentially one example of each one of those lambs. You know, we try to kind of be a partnership between extension and outreach and teaching, and that's what these lambs are developed for and used for. Kind of a 3-way split. So it's nice to be able to participate in this with some homegrown fresh lambs from Arlington, and hopefully, you know, we make a good representation of what we're doing, and you know, we can continue to support these programs in the future. It's nice to be in this new building. We're really excited about bringing more of our lambs through this building in the future. So hopefully we'll have a good partnership with this group. Looks like we're set back up to get Cody, and I know Cody's got some good, exciting, and interesting things that he's working on here. So I'm going to turn it back over to them. I'm going to mute myself, and I'll keep trying to answer some questions, but hopefully we can answer more of them live. Good enough, Bernie?
We just wanted to really quickly get this. This one's going to take a little bit longer to cook. We're good. So what we did here is we butterflied a leg, and you know, we're at about 1.5 inches thick throughout. This thing's going to cook up beautifully. As I said earlier, the legs are really tender on lamb. So we've got, this is going to heat. This is heating from the top. I don't know how much heat we're going to quite generate in here yet, but we're going to let this cook, and then we're going to move over to, this is a lamb sirloin. We seasoned this with some seasoned pepper and some roasted garlic. This has been sous vide. So this sat in a water bath at 135 degrees for, oh, good question, how long? Maybe 3 hours. We put 2 of them in there. There's one of them still in there. So after we put this on, this is already pre-cooked. We're just going to try to sear this to get some caramelization on it and just reheat it a little bit. But right now, this thing coming out at 135 degrees is sitting at pretty much rare. We want to get 145 is going to be medium rare with lamb. This, we're going to want to pull off at 135 degrees. And I don't know if we're going to get time to cut it up, unfortunate for you guys, but we're going to eat well after this is all done. We're going to pull this at 135 degrees and then let it sit for 15, 20 minutes. So all the juices in there can get back into the muscle fibers. That temperature is going to keep rising when we pull it off and hit about 145. So we're going to set this guy right next door.
Can you hear the sizzling, guys?
I don't know if Bernie, you can get underneath there and show them the heat's coming from.
So what kind of a stove is this, Cody, or what kind of contraption are you cooking in?
It's a Vulcan stove, but I think we need to ask Jeff more questions on that.
Yep, so this is just a normal, well, industrial stove. You might find this at a lot of restaurants. So it just has some gas grills and then an open top griddle, and then it has a broiler, and then just a couple normal ovens. So
there's some ceramic plates underneath this flat top that help keep some of that heat on the underside here.
Yeah.
We do have our thermometer that we are going to check the temperature on that leg when we're done, or when we get closer to done. That'll probably be right at the end of the webinar here. So, should we show them the sous vide machine? What's bathing over there? So, an immersion cooker, a precision cooker. Some chefs will say this is cheating. It's honestly, it's great with fish because you can cook. What this does is this gets product to a very specific temperature. And if you look up here, I'm dialed in at 135 right now. If I was doing shanks, I think I'd go up to 180 or so, but I can go up every half degree and be very precise on the cooking methods here. So, like I said, it works great for fish. I mean, the sirloin is such a tender cut. I'm going to shut this off. It has, but I think I started this around 1 o'clock today. But what you would typically do when you're done with this is put it in an ice bath to chill it down very quickly. And then, as I say, you go through and sear it. Some people put mayonnaise on it to sear it. I don't really know all the chemical reactions that do it, but it's supposed to get a really nice quick sear. I'm hoping we have enough heat in the oven there to get the sear we're looking for. But it's quick and high heat.
Can you describe the sear, what sear is?
Yeah, sear is just, it's really hitting that outside of it with a lot of heat, so that you get that crust on there. You get that caramelization and that flavor with the fat. And unfortunately, that 25 years ago was too long, and Jeff could probably talk about the true chemical reactions that's happening there. But it's really imparting that flavor. This is cooked. This is done. But you're really missing out if you don't put the sear on this.
So sear is a really common, it's very old cooking technique where at really high temperatures, like above 350 or 400 degrees, and then when the heat touches the proteins and there's a small amount of sugar present, and sometimes we see a similar reaction with barbecue, but in the case of searing, they're actually browning is called Maillard browning. It creates some really wonderful aromatic, deep, rich flavors, and then that then carries on throughout the entire dish. So, really, really great process.
So there was a question Todd just pointed out to me about seasoning, and we're going to go over some other seasonings in a little bit, but that leg. That leg that was still raw, we used a Bavarian seasoning on it. And this is something that back a decade ago, I made that exact same cut with this exact same seasoning, and we sold it to Costco in Northern California. It's a really great item. So in this Bavarian seasoning has crushed brown mustard, rosemary, garlic, thyme, bay leaves, and sage. And this, later on, I'm going to talk about some of the mutton sausages I make. I use this same, the UW makes a Bavarian sausage. I do too, and I simply use this with some added salt. For a long time, my go-to with lamb has been roasted garlic powder and this seasoned pepper, which is black pepper, red and green bell peppers, granulated garlic and onion. There's a little bit of sweetness in there with those bell peppers, so it's not as sharp. This at home for Ruth and I, this is kind of our everyday pepper.
Somebody said that Bavarian is their favorite too.
It is good. I mean, you guys could, well, we won't sniff it. We all got masks on, but so how's that looking there, Jeff? It's beautiful. Is it? Let's take a quick peek. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure how, I can smell it. Oh, wow.
Wow, look at it going.
I
Ah,
might turn that down
I
a
need
little
to
bit.
turn it down. Ooh,
There you go.
nice.
Leave the one on high on the right. You want a really good sear on the right. You don't want to overdo it on the left. All right, what time we got? 1:45. All right. Let's look at the shanks, and then we'll do chisel. So I figured we'd do something simple and easy from a cooking technique standpoint, and I got an Instapot a few years ago. I hardly ever use it, but it is easy. So we use this recipe, and one of the resources we're going to talk about in a few minutes is the American Lamb Board. When you want to learn about recipes, about cooking techniques, Jeff, do you want to toss some of those under there and reheat them? I forgot about those. I cut those ones so we could try them. Thank you. American Lamb Board's got a great website. There's also the American Lamb Checkoff website. That's more of a resource for producers, where the American Lamb Board site is forward-facing to consumers. But we use this Instant Pot lamb shanks and red wine recipe. Very simple. In any of these sort of things, whether you're doing it in an Instant Pot, whether you're doing it in your oven, slow and just making the house smell wonderful on a winter's day. I've opened this a couple times for everybody to take a whiff of it, and it does smell good even through the masks. So, I mean, in here we had, your basics of any kind of braise, root vegetables, carrots, celery, some garlic. As long as I'm not cooking for my dad, I can put extra garlic in there. There was some herbs de Provence in there, and like this would be something. So I'm going to pull out.
And while Cody's doing that, just to let you know, we'll provide all of those links to the American Lamb Board and some of the other checkoff entities you might want to check into, as well as the recipe that Cody used. So in the follow-up email, we'll have all of those things.
So I'm gonna this is a tough cut. We had to cook it with some moisture. We're gonna toss some moisture on top, but I just want to kind of show how it's like a shredded lamb right now, and that's gonna melt in your mouth.
So this goes back to where Jeff was talking about the active mussels, right? The ones on the ends. You got to cook with moist heat, and this is an example of moist heat cooking with liquid and putting it, in this case, in the Instapot with a little pressure.
Yeah, and what happens, right? So these mussels, they need to have strength and support. So the animals respond by creating some structure to help support those muscles, which is called connective tissue. Connective tissue can be really tough and almost like rubber bandish like if it's really thick. However, if you slowly cook it with moisture, that connective tissue will break down into collagen, and it becomes very soft and tender. And so when you see the muscle starting to tear apart very easily, you have basically broken down that connective tissue, and that's why it pulls apart so easily.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to leave this here. Todd might eat it while we walk away. So there are some questions about flavors and breed. I'd like to chat about that when we talk about the sausages, but let's real quick get some chislic going.
Okay. So in the kitchen too, as we're walking around, there's lots of little different, if you were on our meat science building tour, this is the new kitchen in the building. And there's a lot of different types of kitchen items, utility, that are used in the industry, in the food industry. So it's a great opportunity to try different things. And so now we're gonna use the deep fryer, huh?
Yep. Do you want to talk about?
No.
Uh-oh. Oh, we're getting there.
Okay.
We may not have enough food. I don't know. So I'm not one for fried foods, but if there's anybody, well, the gentleman to my right holding the camera, he goes to school in South Dakota, and this is a local bar treat for them. It's basically deep fried, very lean. This is from the leg, cuts of lamb that, they deep fry it for about 2 minutes. Let it drain off. Typically, you're gonna put some garlic powder on it. Maybe eat it with a little bit of hot sauce. I think saltines are a thing. So I made it for the first time earlier today as a quick test. It's actually pretty good. So there's a deep fryer here. We had lamb legs, so why not? So this will go for about 2 minutes. I think real quick, we can just spin around and talk about some of the resources before we come back, or I can just jump back over here. We laid out a bunch of stuff that the Land Board, American Land Board sent us, kind of one of each of some of the stuff that they have. You know, eating with the seasons, comfort food with the classic, easy entertainment with American Lamb. Gorgeous imagery, a lot of great facts in here. A lot of this stuff, especially for direct marketers, you can get some of this stuff for free from them. Some of it you can pay for. This is kind of a nice, we're upside down on this one. I don't know what I was doing there. You know, lamb cooking basics. And as I was saying earlier, you know, for medium rare, pull at 135 degrees, final internal temperature, 145. My personal opinion, like, don't go over medium. Well done. You're just simply ruining good lamb. But a lot of really nice resources here. Yeah, for lamb. And how hot? I'm actually going to pull it up real quick. We're going to let them drain for a little bit. But those are our little deep fried lamb niblets. Chislic, Chislic. Oh, yeah.
Air fryer.
We brought a lot of toys out, but we don't have an air fryer here.
The best new invention. My favorite as well.
So, you know, we were talking about how different cultures, you know, a lot of people eat lamb, a lot of people eat mutton. And, you know, I think it really lends to the diversity of the protein. And, you know, as well, that just goes to seasonings. I've been playing with a lot of seasonings lately. You know, been looking at the spiceology stuff coming out of Washington State. Hopefully we'll get to, is it okay if we go over, Bernie? Okay, cool. So this Sasquatch eruption rib rub, Mitch had put that on some of those breasts. We did heat some up. I'll talk about those. Wait, we can talk about it. So what Mitch did, there's an oven behind Jeff that he smoked this one for 2 hours, this one an hour and a half, and this one for an hour. He kind of looked at the weight loss for each of these. What we were trying to do was impart a little bit of smoked flavor, and then he put it into a bag, and similar to the concept of the sous vide, he cooked it for a long time at 136 degrees. So we slowly broke down those muscle fibers in there so that this should be good and tender when we bite into it. So I cut this one up. Thank you, Jeff, for keeping an eye on those things. Cut this up so that we just reheated them, we can nibble on them.
And they were done in this oven, right?
Yeah, that was the oven there. Jeff will have to explain more about that.
So I'm just taking some temperatures here. Small piece is 129 degrees. And I am trying to, so for thermometers, where the temperature is measured is always at the very tip, so about the last quarter inch. And it's really important to put it in the very center, the thickest portion of whatever you're measuring. In this case is cut. See, we're now at 113, so now I'm much more closer to the middle. Larger cut. Again, I'm trying to be in the very middle of the thickest portions, is closer to 90 degrees. And when we're cooking whole muscle cuts like this, the most important thing we can do is cook the outside to kill any of the bacteria that might be on the outside, and then the inside of a whole muscle cut is essentially sterile. So this is why we can eat rare or medium rare meats.
So why, Jeff, did you do it from the side rather than just down from the top?
So if I did it from the top, I wouldn't know exactly where the center was. It'd be really hard for me to do. So it's a lot easier for me to go into the side because I know that it's this high and I can roughly guesstimate that half the distance from the top to the bottom is about right here. And no matter where I push it in, I'm still going to be measuring it in about the middle. And here we're about 100, 108 degrees. Again, if I go like this, I don't know exactly where that middle is going to be.
You might be almost poking through it before you know.
Absolutely.
So that's a common mistake, I think, with consumers. So make sure you guys do that from the side, as Jeff kind of illustrated right now.
Yep.
Perfect. All right, and then we're moving back to Cody.
You have me the knife there, Justin. Actually, no, not that. One, the other one. There you go. Well, I mean, as I was saying, you really try to stick to no more than medium. And I think like any protein, you just need to be aware of what's going on and pay attention. I mean, yeah, it's easy if you get distracted. But you really want to be paying attention to what's going on. Sorry. In your kitchen. So this, we're going to figure out how to nibble on these later, but I'm just throwing a little bit of this roasted garlic powder on these. I don't recall what kind of oil was in there. A little bit of salt.
So you did salt and garlic.
And that's it. And I forgot to bring toothpicks. So.
Good. So a really quick, easy way to explain
Right,
it. Air
right.
fryer, that'd be good. I don't know how long you'd have to put it in the air fryer. You might have to, if you're gonna experiment on the air fryer, you might want to test it out and maybe get your thermometer out like Jeff did and check it, make sure it's getting done, and it might be a trial depending upon how long you put it in. If you're like my house, it depends how many French fries you put in it. So how many pieces of lamb in it, you might have to. So here we go. This
So, all
is-
right, so value adding. I do, aside from work for Niman, I do have a small flock. I do, 2 years ago, I did a couple different farmers markets here in the Madison area. And for the last 5 years or so, 6 years now, I've been working a little bit with the mutton. I raise Shropshire sheep. They're going to be a medium diameter wool, black face sheep. Todd said there were some questions on lamb flavor. Lamb, in this, we don't have a lot of good research per se on all the impacts of lamb flavor. I started the mutton project just trying to see if I could make bad flavored mutton out of my sheep, and I couldn't. I've killed 2-year-old rams before. They've been tasty. These sausages, I don't generally make enough mutton. With how this little business has grown, I actually have to incorporate some lamb into it. So I've actually used some Niman lamb trim in some of these. But as long as lamb is young, you're not going to find a lot of flavor differences across whether it's grain fed or grass fed or across breeds. I think it's when you get into older sheep, you may start seeing some of those differences, at 1.5 years to 2 years. That's also where you might start seeing some differences in tenderness on the legs as well. As I said, they're usually tender, but as they get older, that's when that locomotion, carrying that weight around for a little while longer, is going to impact them. So, as I was saying earlier, lamb is super versatile. These are all 5 really different sausage flavors. The gyro tastes spot on like a gyro. One thing that I wish I could do, but with my current processor, I can't. I would like some of these North African style sausages to go into a lamb casing instead of a pork casing. Certain cultures won't buy these because they're in a pork casing. So cumin and fennel is a really nice, put that on a pizza, put it on a bun, super tasty. merguez is probably the most traditional sausage you'll find in some retail outlets. That's a combination of quite a few different seasonings that I put in there. These two are both straight up. So, we saw the Penzies Bavarian earlier. They also have the spicy Berber, which it's got a lot of heat to it. First ingredient in it is, cayenne pepper. So it's got some heat. You can also, just like pork, you can smoke and cure lamb legs. So this is a mutton inside or top round. These are really, really tasty. Great way to value add some of those whole cuts. Similarly, I've been working on some dry cured products. So this is a shelf stable item. This is biltong. It's a South African cured and dried meat. A lot of times they'll do it with wild game in South Africa or lamb. We've done it with some beef. Really, really tasty. They season it with coriander, cure it, hang it. It's going to lose about 50% of its weight. So, I'm putting these up at 4.9 ounces just because on a dollar per pound standpoint, this is actually pretty expensive, but it's also just packed with flavor. You don't need a lot. So, if you've got a salami tray, a cheese tray, this is a nice little item to add to it. Similarly, we've got these are 2-ounce salamis that I sell them for $6 a piece. Another thing that's great to put on a cheese tray. You don't need a lot of this to really impart that flavor. And they're both really unique. This one's a little bit more of an East Indian style. This was one that we just kind of put it together on a whim using some cider from Brick's Cider and then some fennel. This one, I really like this one. This one's a winner. This was kind of a home printed label, but I think this one will keep the making label. We also made a lamb Braunschweiger. Surprised the heck out of me that lamb. I'm not a lamb liver eater, but this was really tasty. There's a sweetness to the lamb liver that I don't think you really get out of a pork liver. But it is a pretty, my processor did say they're not interested in making this again. They had made it 6 years ago and it was super good. I had a bunch of livers, asked them to make it. Liver's kind of a low cost item that when you value add that, you can still get a low price point on this. So this, I sell this for $6 for an 8-ounce package. So this is something I brought along, just showing how shelf stable stuff can really be shelf stable. This is a lamb nduja, not andouille, but N-D-J-U, N-D-U-J-A. It's high fat, it's about 80% fat and 20% lean. It's a spreadable salami and super tasty. This has been sitting in my garage for 6 years. A year ago, we took it to the Bon Appetit test kitchens. I had 2 packages. This is the last one. And I hadn't tried it in 3 years, but this was one of the hits last year when I went to Bon Appetit with the lamb. It was super good. So, for me, freezer space is a value at home. So I really like looking at some of these shelf stable items to value add them and so.
One question was, what's the best way to cook brats? Especially maybe even some of these sausages.
Right, so these are not pre-cooked. I would generally, you're gonna wanna get them to, because they're ground, 160 degrees, Jeff? Okay, good. I would say kind of on a medium heat. It's not something that you don't wanna cook these too fast because you're gonna get the outside cooked too much before the inside.
So if they would grill them, how would they,
Grill-
what would be some specifics?
Grill them
like
over
what would-
medium heat,
Okay.
15 to 20 minutes to a target doneness of 160. Then again, you don't really want to, you got to be careful using the thermometer because once you poke the casing, you lose all the good juices on the inside too.
Yeah, I like to cook brats for their medium to medium high to begin with, and then when you start getting the outside seared, then move them to a location on the grill that's a little bit further away from the heat, so that you still so that you don't have like a burn charred out on the outside, but you still have a nice crispy grilled outside, as well as reaching your temperature of 160 degrees.
Any questions, Todd?
So Jess kind of showed us what some of these look on the inside. So this is that sous vide sirloin. You know, it's got that crisp on the outside we were looking for, really nice, you know, near medium. We did, you know, we're pressed for time here, so we got a little bit of a rareness on it. But, you know, it's, I think I heard Jeff saying earlier, this is essentially sterile on the inside. There's no, we've cooked the outside, we've killed any sort of issues we might have. The only time. So this is a good time for the example. So this is a jacquard. Like you'll find a lot of your steaks at Costco have been mechanically tenderized. Basically, you're punching these needles into the meat to break up those muscle fibers. But by doing that, if there is any sort of contaminant on the outside, you're pushing that into the middle of the meat. So you need to cook that more to make sure that that you've killed any sort of bug that you've just pushed through. I frankly, I don't use this on lamb. I don't even know why I have it at home. But that would be the only concern about eating something that rare. And when we're done here, I might take a bite of that. So, yeah, we talked about this. I kind of got through everything.
Yeah, we get through it. Thanks, you guys. Any questions that we want to end here with, Todd, or should I? Looks like there's a few. I mean, while he's looking through those, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. We're going to go through a few questions that people had, so hang on. Again, I saw a few questions as it related to the educational form that will be in the email. There'll be a link to it that you can jot some things down and turn into your local county if you want. And then, of course, the survey for tonight, there's an evaluation, and we love to hear from you and what you thought of tonight, and what else we could do maybe in the line of meat science and food and cookery. I just want to thank Cody Hiemke from Niman Ranch, who put work into the food part. Dr. Jeff Sindelar, who helped explain what the university does in related to some of the products tonight, and the use of this new facility. Thanks, Todd, for the sheep at the sheep unit and running the Q&A, and Justin for helping us with the microphone as well today. So
I'd like to add, you know, Bernie and I got to take a tour. When was it? 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And Dr. Sindelar gave us that tour, and it was pretty. I mean, as somebody who worked in the old meat lab a long time ago, and then walking through this facility and realizing how much thought went into it, and you know, Dr. Sindelar is the one that really gets the credit for that. I mean, we haven't had a chance to talk about a lot of the flow of how this facility works, but it's amazing. Like, super proud alumni. And thanks, Jeff.
And if you didn't get a chance to see the building, there's a tour on the YouTube channel. Please view that. Jeff Sindelar did that. We did that, I think, just before Christmas, end of 2020. So it's fairly new. The place didn't get too dirty when we went through it. It's pretty spanking new yet. So we like dirtying up the kitchen and getting busy.
Today was the first time the fryer was used, I guess. So.
Yeah. So starting to use things and get this information out to you all to help you with your projects, learn a little bit more about lamb cookery. Don't be afraid of lamb and to cook it. It's a great product, and I think people just over generations were maybe scared of it, and now we sure have a lot of interest in folks. As Jeff said, we can't keep it in stock in the Varsity Meats retail store. So use this. Don't hesitate. I may share Cody's email in the follow-up email, and you can reach out to him if you got more questions related to maybe some of the seasonings.
Just be a little patient. I'm not always super quick with these.
Reminding again about the form. I'm getting a lot of questions. If they filled out the survey, will they get credit for sending? They're going to have to fill out the form.
Yep. If you want credit for your county, you need to fill out the educational form, and that will be in the follow-up email that will likely come tomorrow, because I got to drive home tonight. And the survey is for us to help us better prepare for the evaluation, better prepare activities for you all and what you're interested in. So fill out both, especially the educational form if your county requires it. Okay? Any other questions? Otherwise, I think we probably should wrap up tonight. There will be a recording of this. So if you want to watch it again and get some of the names of the spices and different things, that will be about a week before that will be online. All right. All right. Well, have a great evening, everyone. Enjoy the better weather that we've had since the winter, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the spring. All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great night.